There are other examples of very wealthy widows in the late 17th century in Edinburgh, for example, women who are in the port records involved in export of sales of cloth who could become very wealthy. So I think there are specific trades that are easier for women to enter. And part of the reason I think Agnes was able to be so successful is that in Scotland there was a relative lack of regulation of the printing industry compared to England. So she inherited the right to be king's printer from her husband. And that's partly, having that monopoly was partly the reason why she's able to capitalise on that and become so successful. I think if she'd been starting out on her own as a printer, that it just wouldn't have been possible. You need quite a lot of capital to start up a business. So having these family connections is really important for women and for men. And similarly, women in the port books are often widows of merchants. So it seems to suggest that they were trading together before that point, or they had a business alongside their husband, but they do seem to be particularly associated with certain types of goods that they traded in. And I think there are certain trades that are much more regulated. There are lots of established guilds or incorporations that women didn't have access to. So in certain trades, women just couldn't legally participate because they couldn't get burgessship, they couldn't get association with a particular incorporation because they're male-only incorporations. So although women were able to join the merchant's company or obtain a license to be a shopkeeper, they're kind of restricted to certain kinds of trades, either by regulation or by societal expectation and convention. You see women doing all kinds of different occupations, but they tend to be clustered in trades like the sale of groceries, all kinds of food and drink provision, providing services like lodgings, or in textile work. So there's clusters of women in certain sectors of the economy and of society, and it's harder for them to break into other sectors. But you do see women working in lots of different areas, usually through some family connection. And the printing trade and book trade has a lot of intermarriage and family connections between different printing houses and book traders. So I think women could be quite involved, particularly with the book trade. They couldn't, for example, train to be a lawyer or a doctor, although women did work as carers and healers in a more informal way, sort of folk healing. And you get these lovely recipe books. You find we've got a few in the Glasgow archives that are handwritten recipe books of remedies for different things. So women can kind of be operating in that sphere, but they wouldn't be able to train and practice as medical professionals, although they did work as midwives. And then I think more in the 18th century, there's a bit of a story about the medicalisation of midwifery and male midwives coming in and kind of taking over from female midwives. But there's a bit of debate about to what extent that really happened and to what extent female midwives' agency was actually quelled by male midwives. But there is this kind of story of their knowledge is sort of passed down through generations from other women, from their mothers or grandmothers who were midwives, who know things just through experience, being eclipsed by medicalised midwifery, which was focused on anatomy and examining the human body, and then things like the forceps coming in as tools that male midwives could use that female midwives didn't have access to and didn't use. Yeah, so there's a little bit of tension there around knowledge acquisition and training, and it's quite an interesting field.